Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. In the spirit of the trees, in the spirit of living nature, with deep gratitude to all of our ancestors that have brought us to the present moment, I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising. As we contemplate our world ecology today, I want to bring you up to date on the Washburn Fire that has been threatening Yosemite. After a valiant effort lasting 10 days, the fire is now principally contained. The 500 sequoias that were located in the Mariposa Grove in southern Yosemite National Park have been saved, scorched, but substantially saved. Although today, as you probably all know, in looking at just the headlines of the news wherever you are, it is now Europe that is in a conflagration, and what some people in the French government are calling a heat apocalypse, as fires are breaking out in Portugal and Spain, Italy, France. Great Britain today is going to post its hottest day on record, with specialists saying that this is only the beginning. We are now approaching, as you all may know, 1.5 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial temperatures. And that means 5 to 7 degrees centigrade elevation at the North and South Pole. So the planet is dramatically now heating up, which is the reason why the Secretary General and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change have been warning for several years now that we are now in, as the IPCC calls it, unprecedented territory. And what the Secretary General in August of 2021 called Code Red. We're now in a situation where the ecological turbulence, the climactic turbulence, is at such a level that it's no longer possible for our governments to do much beside wringing their hands, since they collectively refuse, in one of the most extraordinary failures of leadership probably in human history. As the situation goes from bad to worse, our governments wring their hands and still do nothing. It's one of the most remarkable state of affairs that I, certainly in my lifetime, and I think in recorded history, where something so obvious is left systemically unattended. And so Europe burns. India is having similar heat waves. There's been flooding in China. So as we meet today, the environment and the fact that there's over 1 million species, including the human species, that are now endangered in terms of their survival. And we're going to look at just one species endangered that is emblematic of everything that is going on, both in terms of the duress that this particular species is undergoing, the cheetah, but also the extraordinary courage and valiance of people who are trying to save this species. So that's our program today. But before we dive in, let us pause, as we always do, and just take a moment with all this chaos, just to center ourselves in our bodies and be aware that our bodies are nature. Our bodies are the cheetah. They are the trees in different forms. And let us center ourselves in our hearts, and let us breathe together today through our hearts and express solidarity to every species that's endangered, the folks in Europe that are fleeing the fires, and to each other. Thank you, everyone. I was just thinking as we were meditating there, as a memory of when I was a little boy, reading about the cheetahs as being the fastest animal in the world. And at the time, I remember them saying that they'd recorded them up to 72 miles an hour. And I was so inspired and entranced by the cheetahs. I think they were my favorite animals when I was growing up, and I was a little runner as a little boy. And I specialized in short distance running, in part because I was so inspired by the cheetahs. So it's with particular pleasure today that I want to welcome Dr. Laurie Marker, who's the founder in 1990 of the Cheetah Conservation Fund, who has dedicated her life to saving the cheetahs, has written well over 150 scientific papers and I think 5 or 6 books on the cheetah, and has done an extraordinary work like Jane Goodall and the chimpanzees there in Tanzania. There's been various people in our generation that have taken one species and just focalized passion and heartfulness, and in a way that have saved them and now is nurturing them back into some semblance of viability in a very chaotic world. So Laurie, I want to welcome you to Humanity Rising, and please begin by sharing any other facts about your life that you think would be of interest. And Laurie's going to also share a PowerPoint and make a presentation, and then when she's finished, I'll circle back and we'll have a discussion and bring in any comments and questions any of you might have. So Laurie, welcome.
Thank you very much. I will share a PowerPoint, and with that, I'll sort of walk you through, I think, the history of the cheetah and a little bit about my work as well. So I hope I can get on. I believe I can share my screen. I think you have to give me sharing rights, though.
I think you should have it. Yeah.
I don't see that. All I see is you.
It should be on your bottom menu. Should have a share
Here.
screen.
Right. Okay. Do you see that?
Yeah.
You see my screen now?
Yeah, we do. And if you right in the bottom again, you'll see a little. There we go. There we go. Full screen.
Okay. Good.
Cool.
So is that all good? You can all see it then?
That's good.
Perfect. All right. Well, I'm going to talk with you about saving the cheetah and the story of the Cheetah Conservation Fund, which has been kind of my life story for the last 45 years. So stick with me here and I'll tell you all about cheetahs and hope that many of you have questions as well for us. Of course, the cheetah is the fastest land animal, and a lot of people who like to go fast always think of the cheetah, and yet actually it's not all that well known of an animal. Even though we talk about the cheetah, most people don't know the difference between a cheetah and a leopard. Well, this picture here actually shows what a cheetah looks like when it's going full speed, and they're a sprinter. They can only go short speeds or fast speed for a very short period of time. And everything about the cheetah is built for speed. It's an aerodynamic build, very narrow, long legs, lightweight bones and body, small head. And when the cheetah runs, only 1 foot touches the ground at any point in time. And 2 points of the stride, they're actually flying through the air. The cheetah does have semi-non-retractable claws, and their claws are actually very useful for them in gripping the soil on the ground, kind of like cleats for runners. And then the other thing is that cheetahs have those tear marks which run down from their eyes that distinguish them from all of the other spotted cats or any of the other cats. And so those tear marks are like mallard stripes, where they actually help them focus for what they're hunting on. And they also help refract the sun's glare. But those tear marks are what actually distinguish the cheetah from all of the other spotted cats as well. So much more about how the cheetah runs and lives, but mainly the cheetah is a very important part of our ecosystem. But today, as you all know, and has been pointed out earlier, that we are in our 6th global extinction, and our wildlife species are declining at a rate that it is just horrible. Our diversity loss is great. We are losing, at this point, have lost about 25% of our mammals, 14% of our birds, and 41% of our amphibians. And by 2050, there is a possibility that 40% of our terrestrial species are going to be lost to extinction, which just is not right. And with this, of course, there's a huge decline of carnivores, as well as shrinking of their ranges, which is the biggest problem facing them. Cheetahs are important because they do play a role, as do all species, in the health of ecosystems. The cheetah manages and lives on the grassland ecosystems. And with that, they actually keep the antelope species down. They move them through the grass so the grass is not overgrazed. And they're a very important part of the biodiversity, because when they make a kill, they oftentimes don't get to eat it all. They will eat very rapidly, and then they are usually pushed off by jackals, could be lions, leopards, even birds of prey. But then the cheetah will eat fast and then get pushed away. And with that, it leaves food for all of the other animals in the veld, whether it's the jackals. And I always say to the farmers that if the cheetah has made a kill and it's feeding the jackals aren't going to be ending up in your goat yard. So there are ways of trying to talk with farmers about the importance of top predators, but our health of our ecosystems is very critical. Unfortunately, the cheetah is today one of Africa's most endangered big cats and species. You can see by this slide, we are talking about a loss of over 90% of their range and 90% of the cheetah population in only about 100 years. Today, there are less than 7,500 cheetahs left, and they're only found in 23 countries. We've lost about 20 countries where the cheetah's gone extinct in the past about 40 years. So it's a very recent extinction, and I've been right in the middle of it for a very, very long time. The threats facing the cheetah really are the same kinds of threats that many species are facing, with that of loss of habitat. With that, we end up with most of the cheetahs living outside of protected areas. And so there is human-wildlife conflict. So cheetahs can catch goats or cattle, and with that, then they're usually caught or killed. There's also illegal wildlife trade that I'm going to talk with you more about today, as well as the problem facing the cheetah in genetically, that it lives in very small fragmented populations. And our early research in the 1980s found that the cheetahs are very special because they do lack genetic diversity. And that has taken us down a lot of roads to understand more about the whole species. This is where the cheetah population is today and what its past range looked like. The light yellow is where the range was 100 years ago. And the darker orange there is where the cheetahs are found today. And some of these areas look like they may be a large amount of animals, like up there in Algeria, except between Algeria and Mali, the population might only be about 150 to 200 individuals. So again, the cheetahs living in very small fragmented areas. There are about 31 populations, and most of them are found outside of protected areas. Where I'm based down here in the southern part of Africa, in Namibia, where I am today, we have about 50% of the remaining cheetahs found on our lands between Namibia and Botswana. I also have a base that we are working out of up in Somaliland, which is in the Horn of Africa, and I'll be talking with you more about that as well. So a lot of people wonder how I ended up getting involved in saving cheetahs. Well, I always think I was a normal kid. I was fortunate enough to grow up with animals. I love animals very, very much. And I grew up riding a horse. So I started my horseback riding from the time I was about 4 years old. And to this day, every day that I can, I ride every morning. And it centers me and it keeps me focused. And it allows me to continue my very close relationship working with my horse and in nature. I also grew up with dogs and goats, and I had no idea that I was going to be doing what I do today, which is taking care of wildlife. But in the early 1970s, I moved to Oregon from California, and there a wildlife park called the Wildlife Safari had just opened, and their logo was the cheetah, and I was fascinated. I wanted to know everything about the cheetah. And I went there and I got a job. My job was as the veterinary supervisor. And I grew up, as I said, with animals and as a veterinary technician most of my life. And then when I got into the wildlife safari, my job was to not only care in the nursery and for many of the orphan and infant animals that came in, my job was also to take care of many of the very rare animals, and the cheetahs came under my care. And I wanted to know everything about them. And back in the 70s, we didn't have things like internet. And the director at the Wildlife Safari said, great, why don't you write people around the world and find out what you can about cheetahs? And as I wrote to people, everyone wrote back saying, cheetahs are very, very rare. There are very few of them living in captivity. We were one of the only places in the world with cheetahs, actually, in Oregon. And they don't breed well in captivity, which is one of the works that I've been involved in now since the 1970s. And also we're losing them in the wild. They have a very short lifespan. So, gee, what can you do? When you find out something about cheetahs, let us know. Well, that started me out on this because I wanted to know everything there was about cheetahs. And the more I found out, years later, I realized that we needed to have a nonprofit organization, the Cheetah Conservation Fund, to take care of the few remaining cheetahs that are left on Earth. My research started with cheetahs in the middle 1970s, where I took a cheetah that was orphaned and hand-raised in Oregon to Namibia, where her parents had come from. And my job was to find out if a captive-born cheetah could learn how to hunt. Well, this is the first time it had ever been done. And zoos back in those days and wildlife parks like we were, thought that, you know, if we could help breed animals in captivity, we could eventually put them back out into the wild, not realizing to what rate of the extinction was at that point in time. And so I came to Namibia and I did teach this cheetah, whose name is Kayam, how to hunt back out into the wild. But what I actually found more than anything else was that farmers were killing about 800 to 900 cheetahs a year. They considered them vermin and they hated them. And I didn't understand this, and I wanted to understand why. And that's really the big question that I have, is why were people killing cheetahs? Was it because they were catching their livestock, or was it were they just perceived to be a problem? And that's what our research actually found, is it was a perceived threat. But still in the 1980s, as I was getting my work ready to figure out if I can come over here to Namibia, the farmers here had killed about close to 10,000 cheetahs, which is more than what the cheetah population is today. So we had to stop the killing. And so I came here to Namibia, and I started going door to door and asked the farmers anything that they could tell me. What I found was that cheetahs were going into their farmlands. Of course, over 80% of them live outside of protected areas, primarily because of lions and hyenas, which push them away and can kill them. So they found a place here on these huge farmlands in Namibia where there was still lots and lots of wildlife. And so I wanted to know everything about how the cheetahs were living and how the farmers were living with them. I found that cheetahs are primarily caught in these cage traps in the lower left of the film, and they go to what are called marking trees. They go to these marking trees to leave their scent, either feces or urine, and it's called a newspaper tree. And so with that, there's a lot of communication that's going on out in the bush, but that's also where the farmers were killing and catching cheetahs, in these capture cages. So in 1990, Namibia got independence from South Africa. And with this, I had said as soon as Namibia got independence, I would be packing my bags and moving to Namibia, which I did. So I founded the Cheetah Conservation Fund. And this is what our research center looks like today. Our mission statement is to be an internationally recognized center of excellence, the cheetah conservation of cheetahs and their ecosystems. And we will work with all stakeholders to develop best practices in research, education, and land use to benefit all species, including people. And our goals are really to work on research, conservation, and education. And with our research, it's to be the premier repository and generator of science around cheetahs and their habitats. And for conservation is to ensure sufficient habitat and prey for cheetahs, and to mitigate conflict to ensure stable and increasing populations of cheetahs. And for education is to actually teach about cheetahs and habitat conservation status, which will improve through raised awareness of local, national, and international communities. So we have a lot of work that we laid out to do when we first set up the foundation. And we have been plugging along very actively for the last over 30 years. So our different programs are all based around what we've learned about working with the farming communities, and have grown continually our programs to save the cheetah. That of our research in genetics, economic development, hospitality, land management, public awareness, One Health, capacity building, ecology, education, training, habitat restoration, and that of the illegal wildlife trade. And those are all the things that we've tried to do in order to save the cheetah. So that's been a lot of my life. And what I've done is I've gone out and I've worked together with the farming communities all around the cheetah's range, trying to find out what their problems are, what they need, what they know about livestock management, what they know about rangeland management and wildlife and predators, and why it is that they're not only killing the cheetah, but all the other predators that are so important to maintaining our biodiversity of the world. I've been to most all of the cheetah range countries. This is actually in Iran, where the last of the Asian cheetahs are now down to potentially less than 20 individuals. And I've been working very closely in Iran for the last 20 years. It's a very, very hard country to work in when you're, number one, an American, and number two, a woman. This is in Algeria, where we've developed active programs there, working with the rural communities and their culture. And this reserve where the cheetah is found has a very strong culture base as well. And with this, we've now brought the cheetah into the Algerian lifestyle and having them learn more about how they can live together with the cheetah. And so for the cheetah to survive, we've found that really revolves around understanding mostly about their biology and ecology. And then we have to stop conflict and stop illegal wildlife trade and actually look at education and livelihoods and try to help the people so that they can make better livings and livelihoods at the same time living together with a predator. When I first started in Namibia, I wanted to know more about where the cheetahs were, how they were living. We knew nothing about what their home ranges were. We knew nothing about what a healthy free-ranging cheetah looked like from a biological health standpoint. And so my research area here was quite large. The area that I pulled aside over to the right is about 15,000 square kilometers. And you can see where it is overlaid on the map. All of the red dots are where cheetahs were we trapped, where we were actually able to put collars on the animals and actually get blood tissues from them, scat, feces. And then all the black dots are where I went door to door and actually talked to the farmers on the big map. On the other map on the right, where I've pulled side, that's when we did put radio collars on cheetahs, where we actually were able to follow them. So it's just a lot of movement out there on that 15,000 square kilometers that we were able to learn a lot more about how the cheetahs were living and living together with the farming community. And we were able to share that with the farmers. So our research actually has revolved around trying to find the root causes for the threats of why the cheetah is being caught and killed, and what population numbers looked like, habitat restoration, social research, working with people, illegal trade investigations, genetics, and our veterinary medicine. We've got a great veterinary team. Ann Schmidt-Kunzel over here on the picture is our assistant director for animal health and genetics. And the young man with her, Dr. Ezekiel Fabiano, was one of our first PhD students here in Namibia. Our philosophy here in Namibia has been to train the best scientists as the future for Africa. And so instead of just bringing everything back to America, what we've tried to do is to develop a research center that is training the best and the brightest from throughout Africa to take care of their wildlife and their lands. An interesting point from our early research, as I'd mentioned, the cheetahs do lack genetic diversity. And this had to do with our early work back in the 1980s, where we actually found out that cheetahs are all genetically the same. We looked at their sperm, which is about 70% abnormal. Now, 40 years later, we're looking at about 80% abnormal sperm as the populations of cheetahs get smaller. We then tried to figure out, well, what was this all about? We found out the cheetahs, through doing not only blood sampling, also doing skin grafts, like you can see over on the right. And we found that the cheetah actually was very genetically the same, and it had a monomorphism to it. And using the MHC, we were able to actually understand much more about this species. It actually changed how people looked at wildlife species on a global scale at the beginning of what we now call conservation biology. We found out the cheetah also is an animal that was very susceptible to disease, where we ended up with very high mortality of a disease called feline infectious peritonitis. It's a coronavirus, very similar to kind of the problems that we dealt with the last couple of years with COVID-19. Very, very, very high mortality, up to 60%. And we still see that today, and it is linked into the genetic similarity of the species. And so the biggest problem we found is that both the wild and captive cheetahs had a lot of problems. We've been able to sequence the cheetah's genome in the last few years, and all of this we've been able to document very closely. We know a lot about the cheetah. What we now need to do is save it because we have a lot of knowledge. So in our veterinary clinic, and we do have a registered veterinary clinic as well as a genetics lab here on site in Namibia, Our studies are long-term because we want to learn a lot about the cheetah over time. So as I said, I worked on probably close to 1,000 individuals or more now with huge numbers of samples. We're looking at diseases, stress factors. We're looking at reproduction. We've been able to bank down a lot of sperm from male cheetahs. We've been able to bank embryos that we've been able to use and make with through the blastocyst stage. We do a lot of training of our veterinarians and scientists. So the veterinarians play a very, very key role, just trying to understand much more about their overall health and how we can keep them alive and well, both in the wild as well as in captivity. One of the programs that we work with other animals because we also want to find more about scat. And we used to use blood and tissue samples in our genetics lab. And fortunately, as farmers have quit catching as many cheetahs, we now use detection dogs that go out and find scat for us. The scat, we traveled throughout Namibia. We're now working up in Angola. And what we do is we find the scat and it comes back into our genetics lab. But when we find the scat, we can work together with the farmers. They seem to be interested. We can spend a lot of time talking with the farmers about this. And when the scat comes back into our lab, this is kind of what it looks like. We call it black gold. And from this, it allows us to individually identify animals. We can look at populations with them. We can also look at what the cheetahs have eaten. We can look at hormones and parasitology. And so the scat plays a very important long-time role in the work that we continue to do in understanding more about the population of cheetahs. Most of the cheetahs that we've had our hands on, we have been able to release back out into the wild. I was saying earlier that we had a good day yesterday because we were able to put a wild female back out into the wild. And we have a male that came in from a farmer a few days ago, and he had to go to the dentist today because when we worked on him and put a collar on him a couple days ago, we found that he had a broken canine tooth. So we have a local dentist here that my team is at the dentist right now fixing the canine tooth so that the cat can be released back out into the wild on Wednesday. So of these, we use radio collars, and these days we use satellite collars. So we're able to download our information and know where the cheetah is at all given times. Cheetahs have huge home ranges up to about 1,500 square kilometers. That's about 800 square miles. And so their ranges are very, very, very large. We also learn a lot about how cheetahs are living and other animals. We're also working with African wild dogs in these areas. And we use camera traps. And these camera traps are great. We work with the communities. You can see kind of a gridded area that we would put our cameras in. And we then work with the communities to keep an eye on those camera traps. We can then get the pictures off of them. And from that, start understanding much more about what animals are living out in the areas and help share with the farmers more about how they can live with these various different predators, because each one of them can cause a farmer problems. What we want is not to have problems, but then to learn to live in harmony with these species. And one of the ways we do this is through our conservation program. We have what's called an integrated livestock and wildlife management program that we practice here in Namibia. So our livestock lives on the land that we manage, where there is wildlife that lives all around our area. We also work very closely with Improved Health. We have a program we call Future Farmers of Africa, and we look at non-lethal deterrents, like the use of livestock guarding dogs. You can see a dog in the middle of that picture there, and he kind of blends in. But this breed of dog is a Kangal dog, and we've been started this program in 1994. So going on 26, 27 years. We've had over 700 puppies born, and we place them with the farmers when they're puppies, when the dogs are about 3 months of age, and they grow up with the livestock, not with the farmers or their farm workers. They grow up with the livestock, and we see between a 70 to 100% decrease in livestock loss. And what the dogs do is they grow up with the flock, and they protect them. They have a very, very long, loud bark. They mark territory, but they basically say to the predators that are around, we're here and we're big, and just stay away, because if you don't stay away, I'm equal to your size, and these dogs will go after a predator that comes with their flock. And it's not like a herding dog. A herding dog will run the flock like a border collie. What the guarding dog does is it hears a problem and it stops and it barks, and the herd stays right with it, so they don't run. And then that running, the predator also, if prey is running, that's what really starts getting the predator to want to go into its stalk, run, hunt, kill. And so the dog actually stops that. So again, they're a very big dog, and they decrease the loss of livestock to the farmers, not only to the cheetah, but to any of the predators that we have, jackals, caracal, the leopard, baboons. So they have become a huge asset to the farming community. We also have livelihood development programs, and we work with communities and habitat restoration and what our rewilding and reintroductions look like. But our community-based programs revolve around things like, since we have our livestock guarding dogs, we also have a goat dairy and creamery. So we make our cheeses, and we teach rural communities that they can have a few goats, and we've now been working with them on increasing the milk production of a rural goat by helping bring in new milk bloodlines. And this is helping them learn that they can actually make cheeses. We're also working with other communities where there are like camels, like in the Horn of Africa. So they're learning that they can also use the camel milk for things like cheeses, and I have to say that goat milk ice cream is some of the best there is in the world. We also make things like soaps. So our livelihood development program has been a very, very interesting project. We call our creamery the Dancing Goat Creamery, because our goats dance because they're protected by livestock guarding dogs, which are saving the cheetah. We have another program that we've worked on, and that is a habitat restoration program. And so although we hear the word habitat loss can actually occur in many different ways. And what we've seen in the arid Namibia is that over 100 years of overgrazing of the land in a very arid area, we end up with a thickened thorn bush. And this thorn bush that you see in the upper left is actually a huge problem. It grows, I always say it grows a lot like blackberry bushes. You cut off one piece and about 20 other pieces grow in it. But this bush has very, very deep roots, and it's a form of desertification. And so what's happened is that this thickened bush has taken over about a third of the country of Namibia. And every place I travel around Cheetah's range areas, I've seen the similar kind of overgrazing and thickened thorn bushes, which have taken over from this overgrazing. So what we've done is we've learned that we can selectively harvest the bush, and we chip it, and we make a fuel log through extrusion, and it's called bush block. And with this, it is, and our entire organization is Forest Stewardship Council certified. I'm a very major proponent of certification, and if we could certify all of our woods, I think we would stop a lot of deforestation that's going on in many of the areas, especially where our primates are of concern. That of even in Asia, the orangs and the gibbons were losing their habitat because of the problems with our forestry. So I'm a firm believer that certification can play a key role. Other things we're doing with our biomass program are also making bush to feed, where we're chipping up the green bush and actually making a pelleted food that can be also fed to some of our small stock or our cattle. Also can be used for wildlife. But the main point on why we got involved in this is that farmers were saying that their land had become so thickly thorn bush that they couldn't kill the bush anymore, and they were killing anything that was causing them a problem. and one of those was predators. And so we started this biomass program to work with the farmers to help them harvest their bush, utilizing the bush that can make them money, at the same time opening up habitat where there can be more prey for the wildlife, grasslands for the wildlife, and more prey for animals like the cheetah, reducing the farmers killing more of the cheetahs as well. So that's been a very active program that we've been involved in. So again, our work really revolves around keeping cheetahs living in the wild by reducing the predator conflict on the farmlands. And this has gone far and wide. When I set up our programs here in Namibia back in the early 90s, I was the first person who actually had worked with predators outside of a protected area. Most people were looking at animals through binoculars as biologists, figuring out how much they were killing or hunting and where they were going, but none of them had been worked with outside of protected area with people. And so I've had to work very closely with the farming community. And again, a lot of the work that I've done with them has been on trust. And that trust is something that grows with getting to know somebody, but also offering better solutions instead of just killing an animal. So one of the questions that I continue to ask myself is, when a litter of cubs is born, what will their future be? And this brings me into an area that we have dove into for the last about 4 years, and that's an area around the Horn of Africa, where our second base is, which is up in Somaliland. Now, Somaliland is a breakaway country from Somalia, and they are at the closest area over to the Middle Eastern Peninsula at crossing the Gulf of Aden there. And what we have found is that cheetahs are being smuggled, confiscated illegally over into the Middle East, but coming through Somaliland, primarily up from Ethiopia. And so this is where we've now been based for the last few years. Many people think of illegal wildlife trade as that of rhinos and elephants, but the cheetahs are actually a major problem. And they're being promoted through social media. And quite often this is what you would see on the social media if you look up, cheetahs and the Middle East. And this is what we're trying to stop, is that these animals should be living in the wild and not as private pets. Well, I've been very active also in policy work as well. Now, CITES is the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species. What we're talking about is that of the illegal trade of endangered species. And with this, we have to spend a lot of our time working with the CITES. And there will be another CITES meeting in Panama, where we do have cheetahs again on the list to talk about. And it is, we hope, going to be one of the last times that we have to go to CITES and ask for their help, and hope that they will actually help us make it through to stop the trade. So for the trade, we're looking at up to about 300 cheetahs a year going through into the Middle East. And for the cheetahs that are caught in the Horn of Africa, they're bought primarily from the rural communities for $50 to $100. They're sold once they make it into the Middle East illegally at about $15,000. For every one cheetah that makes it there, probably only about 4 or 5 of them die along the way. And this gives an idea of the numbers of animals that we've been dealing with. We got involved in this back in 2005, and there were only a few animals, and then we started learning about more and more of them. And to the point that in 2020 and 2021, we've got in between 30 and 40 cheetahs each year. Not all of them make it, sadly. About 50% of them don't, because we get them at such a critical time. They've been confiscated and most of them are malnourished. But they need 24-hour care, and this now has caused us a huge amount of work and effort Today we are dealing with about 88 cheetahs in our reserves in Somaliland. So one of the things that we're trying to find out is where they've come from. The green areas are where we are estimating their home ranges to be, where we are now starting to track these areas by doing surveys and awareness and trying to put camera traps up and understanding more about where they're living. And then the red areas are where the trade incidents have occurred, where they, the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change in Somaliland has been confiscating these cubs, and we've been working very closely with them to try to understand more about where. We've done surveys out in these areas, especially in the areas where the cats have been confiscated, and giving an idea of what the rural communities look like. They are nomads and pastoralists, and are dealing with either their camels or their goats and sheep. And those are primarily what their problems are, is they say that the cheetah comes in and tries to catch their livestock, that they've been found that they can catch the animals, and the illegal dealers are coming in and working with them to try to have them catch more and more. So our community engagement programs have been we've been doing surveys, we've been doing educational talks and programs in the communities to try to help them realize that it's illegal to catch and kill cheetahs and other animals, wildlife animals in Somaliland. So we've got a very, very active working relationship with the Ministry of Environment and Culture Change. These are the communities that we are working with up in the Somaliland area. Again, women are kind of second class, and so that is interesting for me to try to work closely with them, but trying to help the women there realize that they can actually do more things themselves as well. We've looked at all their livestock, we've understood their camels, so it's been a very active part of the work that we've been involved in. When we're doing surveys, obviously I don't speak the language, and many of them actually do speak English, but we do always have an interpreter with us. And we work with women's groups as well as heads and businessmen and community leaders. So we do a variety of different kinds of surveys and are trying to learn more about what the communities know about their wildlife, as well as that about where the cheetahs are, and to help them know that it's illegal to take cheetahs for the illegal trade. We're also trying to follow a lot of questions where the people have told us they've seen cheetahs and cheetah tracks. And there we've been putting up camera traps to try to learn more about where the cheetahs are living out in this area. But we've been able to also discover a lot of wildlife up in the Horn of Africa, which most people never knew about. So this is a new area for where cheetahs are living. And we're hoping to help develop this country into a country like Namibia that's been very active in conservation and trying to develop the programs that we have here in Namibia there in Somaliland. But right now we have 88 cheetahs. We've got one leopard that came in that they thought was a cheetah, but it's not. Again, a lot of people don't know what they look like. We're based in 5 different facilities that are fast holding facilities. And right now we're trying to develop a permanent sanctuary. So last year, the Ministry of Environment signed a 30-year MOU with us, where today we're working with them on developing the first national park. It's called Gedebli, and that it's about a 50,000 hectare reserve. And within that, we will have a sanctuary that we're developing right now. And this will be an area where these cheetahs that have been confiscated will be held. These cheetahs are not able to go back out into the wild because they're in such poor condition when we get them. And they come in at such a young age, they're all bottle raised, so we have to take care of them. And this is what our conservation center will look like that we are building right now. So we dug ground in December to start the center, and it is going to be the Rescue and Conservation Center. That's Mark with me, who's our project manager. And we're building right now. Are going to be developing 800 acres of land in Gedebli, and we are looking for more partners to help us complete the center and to complete working with the national park. But these cubs really do need help, and the cheetah as a whole, as a species, needs a lot of help. We've been very active at the work that we do, but we're a small boutique organization, only a handful of people working towards saving cheetahs. So we do need more help with this. This is a short video that I think you might just enjoy looking at briefly. I thought that you would enjoy looking at that. We're also working on the demand reduction side, and we are working out in the Middle East to try to stop the trade, again through education and political pressure. So I'm hoping that in the next few years, the trade will stop. We put one of the most important books together, which is called Cheetahs, their biology and conservation, and would welcome you to, if you want to learn more about the cheetah, to get this book. It is available on our website, which is cheetah.org. And our mission is, again, keeping cheetahs living in the wild. You can visit us as well. We have a very, very small tourism lodge. We have 5 rooms, and we have a place called the Babson House, which has 3 rooms and is exclusive and very special. So any of you who'd like to learn more about our work, please come and visit us in Namibia. And we also have volunteers here as well, so people can learn more about the work that we do, as well as interns, by coming to the Cheetah Conservation Fund and learning more. Please again go to our website, which is cheetah.org. Now our mission is to change the world to save the cheetah. And I've given you an overview of work to save the cheetah, but that's my life. That's what I've been doing for the last 45 years, doing everything that I possibly can, from research, conservation, and education, to try to save the cheetah. But as you know, we do need to change the world. And I hope together, all of us can change the world so that we can save the cheetah. Not very many of them left in the world, and I just as soon save the cheetah and the world at the same period of time. So you can join us. You are the solution, and you can be a part of our family and friends. So thank you for listening and learning more about the story of the cheetah and why it should be saved and how you can help us. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie, very much. What an inspiring story, particularly the way you've been saving all those little baby cheetahs. Well done. Maybe turn off your screen share. There
we go. There. Okay.
There we go. Good. Well, thank you. A couple of just questions that were coming up as you were moving along. One is, I got the impression, I just wanted to verify it from your opening remarks on the biology and sort of the particular characteristics of the cheetah, is that they're rather fragile in relationship, say, to the lions and the tigers that, from what you were saying, feel to be a little bit more robust. Was that an incorrect surmise from what you're saying? And how would you differentiate the cheetahs, say, from the tigers and the lions in terms of basic biology?
Well, they are the smallest of all the big cats. And with that, they are not powerful and aggressive. And so they are more delicate. And they believe in flight versus fight. And with that, if anything happens to them, they're pretty much, they can't do anything. So they've got very short teeth. They've got, dog-like claws. And really, their only part of their success in life is the fact that they're fast and they're a really good hunter. But they're hunting not just for themselves, they hunt for their whole system. But they are a fragile animal. I consider them to be that way. Again, just knowing more about their genetics and overall health, we also know that they are vulnerable to ecological and environmental changes, which is what's going on today, that we're monitoring and do see that. So yes.
It's a paradox, isn't it, that they're so fast and they're such great hunters, but they're the smallest and the most delicate in some ways of the big cats.
Yes, I know it's but they are a survivor. They've survived on Earth for thousands of years. We just need to give them a space. We know what it is going to take to save them, and their survival is basically in our hands.
Yeah. And that led to a question about, when you're saving all these cheetahs, and some of them you're saying aren't able because they're too young and too malnourished to go back into the wild, so that you also, as part of your Namibia and then Somaliland projects, you would essentially have not a zoo, but you would have areas where cheetahs are sort of living permanently. Describe that. Is it like what Linda Tucker's doing, in South Africa, where the white lions are they're just put out on a huge reserve, and they live like they're wild, but they're actually contained, and they bring in wildebeests or something, for their meals and so forth and so on. How do you treat the captive cheetahs in your reserves?
Well, yes, they are in very large enclosures, but you don't just throw in an animal to them. That's not allowed here, basically, just because of welfare issues. But they are fed. Their enclosures are very large, so they could be 6 to 20 hectares, depending on the numbers of animals that are in there. And then so then they live more naturally, but they are fed. And ideally, what we want to do is to see, the cats that we have right now with these 80 cheetahs are all under 4 years of age. So we hope to get them out into this larger environment at this point in time to then assess their health better once they get out of the enclosures they're in. The enclosures they're in right now are large zoo type cages, but they are not out in a natural area. So this will be a much better place, and we're hoping to have this finished and ready to move these animals by, we hope, the end of the year. So we're actively building right now.
Gotcha. Because that, I know Linda Tucker, as I'm sure you do quite well. And, that's always the challenge for Linda is, once you save a white lion or a cheetah, then sort of what do you do? How much do you seek to recreate their natural habitat in a domesticated framework? And how much do you just let them become as wild as they possibly can? And the fact that you have like 6 to 20 hectares, that's a lot of land, but it's not in terms of the range of the cheetah. It's still small. And then when you feed them, what do you feed them?
We feed primarily camel meat at this point, and some goat meat, but primarily camel. That is all there is to feed them, actually. And we go through right now about 6 camels a week just to feed these cats.
So you're buying 6 camels a week, and then I guess you butcher them, and then you just feed them at certain sort of feeding stations in the land where they are. Yeah,
they have different areas where they are fed. But remember, they all came in as tiny babies. So all of these cats actually had to be bottle raised. And so none of them have a feeling of being wild. That's why we don't want more coming in from the wild. The ones that are there, we will take care of. But we really need to stop the trade. We need to stop the farmers from catching them and killing them. We need to stop the traders from selling them. So that's really what our message is everywhere, is to, and what we have to do is to work with the people so that they learn that they can live with these animals.
Right. And, that was raising another question in my mind. I was very interested in the data showing that even though the farmers thought that they should kill the cheetahs because they were devouring their livestock, in fact, that wasn't happening.
Right. It's mainly a perceived threat. And that's what the problem is that they perceive that there is a threat, and then they kill them. And so that's what goes on with, we've all hated predators for thousands of years because our fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers all said, get rid of all the predators, not realizing how important our predators are today to our ecosystems, which they're so important. When you have a top predator, you have much greater biodiversity. And the biodiversity is the link that keeps us all alive and healthy. But those are just hard things for people to understand.
Yes, exactly. Well, let me bring in a couple of questions. One from Stan, who's curious about the possible relationship between animal conservation and the work of Alan Savory in land management.
Yes, Alan is a great old friend. And the belief is, as we have here in Namibia, we call it an integrated system. And what Alan does is teaches land use and livestock use, and the fact that if you have your livestock and you manage it properly, you can manage better your land as well. And so a lot of that really revolves around the systems that we've seen work, like in, let us say, the Serengeti, where you've got large concentrations of wildebeest going through their migratory areas. And when you've got so many animals, and this is what Savory also looks at, is a large concentration that is moving rapidly through the land, you end up with that large concentration digging up the earth with their hooves, and then defecating, which means they're fertilizing the soil, and then moving away. And predators help with this as well, because predators would group your wildlife species, because when there's something chasing, they usually group together and then they move. And so we as people need to actually do that as well. And that's why the Savory system plays a very important role in teaching people how to move their livestock and not overgraze their land.
Right. And then thank you for that, because that's the kind of the eternal balance, land management and species preservation. And even here, in the United States, as the top predators, there's a mythology of danger and enmity, like the wolf. So the farmers would just kill any wolf they saw, independent of whether the wolves were actually damaging their livestock or not. And you can see that there would be the same sort of mythology around the cheetah or the lion or the elephants and so forth. If it's big, probably dangerous, kill it.
Right, exactly. And that's the problem we've got on a global scale, is that we just are killing all of our predators, not knowing that we can live with them. Yeah, and I always say that we should be certifying our meat. So that's another program that we've been working on, is to try to get people to buy certified food, which
exactly,
have a price premium, if indeed they're working well on the land with their livestock.
Yeah. Now, Kurt Kruger, Laurie's asking a interesting related question. Speak more on the kind of the top predator generally, in terms of when that top predator goes extinct. What is the kind of the cascading effects that are felt through the general ecosystem? And in particular, speak to us about the loss of a cheetah in an ecosystem and how that adversely affects the species ecology.
I think that's an interesting point, and we've actually been working at in India, for instance, because the cheetah went extinct in India back in the 1950s. And with that, their grasslands are now a endangered landscape. So what happens is that the landscapes become, in many areas, barren. They've become overgrazed quite often by the livestock without a predator within them. So again, understanding your systems and how the systems work really are important. So the grasslands are being overgrazed by livestock without predators in the system. If you add a predator, and these grasslands can actually regenerate, you have to give them time to regenerate. So those are all big issues that we're dealing with today. So when you lose a predator from the system, trying to get it back is much more difficult. But as you get it back, you see a more healthy, a resilient ecosystem as well. So with the grasslands, again, if you've got grasslands, they can either become overgrazed and bush encroached, like we see here in Namibia and many of the other areas where the cheetah is, or you can end up with desertification, which is just sand deserts. And rehabilitating these sand deserts is very, very difficult as well. And predators can come back in, but you have to give them time to be able to rejuvenate their grasses, even in these very arid lands, and then bring in your prey base, and then a predator can come back in as well. It is a very, very difficult process.
Yeah, and I would imagine, where you are in Namibia or even Somaliland and elsewhere, there's more than one sort of alpha species. You got the cheetahs, you got lions, you've got tigers and so forth. And as you do your work, how do you interact with the lions and the tigers that are around and the other big species? Do you that's sort of somebody else's issue, or because they're all grazing and they're all kind of out there? How do you differentiate your work with the cheetahs with the other large mammals that are running around at the same place at the same time?
Well, where we are, we don't have lions on our landscape here in Namibia or in Somaliland, but what we do have is leopards, and so we work a lot with leopards, as well as that of jackals and African wild dogs. But the leopards are probably the biggest key animal that we have to deal with mostly, and so we've done a lot of the same with them. Learned about how they live, looked at them through radio collaring them, understanding more about what their home ranges look like, and then working with the farmers to try to help them learn that they can also live together with like leopards as well. And I think farming with leopards is equally as difficult. Lions are very big, but they're afraid pretty much. The friends that a lot of my friends, obviously, most all my friends are predator biologists. So where they're working, some of the areas, cheetahs are not usually found in areas where there are that many lions, because the lions will take their food and steal their cubs. And so cheetahs actually move away a lot from lions. The leopards and cheetahs overlap more so. And the leopards are a problem because they can kill their young as well as an adult cheetah. But a lot of the work that we're trying to do for the cheetah, it overlaps with all the other predators. So, so we don't work with tigers at all because yet we are looking at trying to help India repopulate cheetahs back into India, with a possibility of cheetahs going back as early even as this year. So
fantastic, fantastic. Well, good. Just as a final domain, I'd love to just explore with you. You know, you're clearly by now, after 45 years, what they would call a cheetah whisperer. And I just would love to hear, and I think our community, you know, how has your relationship with the cheetah shaped your spirituality? And have you had any particular, you know, mystical experiences with the cheetah? Do you, you know, like Linda Tucker, you know, she communes with the white lions in a particular way and they roar for her and so forth, as you know. And similarly with Jane Goodall with the chimpanzees. Tell us about your spiritual relationship with the cheetah after 45 years. How's it shaped you? How's it changed you?
I'm not sure. I mean, it's obviously shaped me and changed me in the fact that all I'm trying to do is to save this species. And I mean, I think I can go anywhere and commune with a cheetah because I know how they talk. And but really the biggest issue is to deal with humans. So how I think a lot of what it's done is it's tried to get me to get people to understand that this is a very special animal that deserves to live on Earth. And the only way it's going to is if we make that Earth for it. So I don't know. I mean, they're an amazing animal. And as I say, we just put one back out in the wild yesterday. And you know, all of us watching, you know, you just want to cry because it's so beautiful to know that it potentially could have not made it. And fortunately, we were called and we were able to get it back out into the wild. And I think that that's key. So I mean, I don't know. I have a lot of work to do. So I think all of that is just focused on everything that I know about the cheetah and how it is that we can actually save it.
Yeah, good. Well, as we end, then just tell us how we can support the Cheetah Conservation Fund. Are there any priorities that you have that you want to draw to our attention? Any particular projects that people could potentially support?
Right.
Just in conclusion, tell us
Right.
how we can support you.
Well, I think the biggest thing we're working on right now is to try to get our Gedebli area in Somaliland built so that we can move the cheetahs out from the cages that they're in into a sanctuary. And that's what we're doing right now. And from there, I then need to build an education center there as well, like we have here, where we'll be doing a lot of training for their wildlife rangers and trying to work with the communities to have them learn more about wildlife. This is an area up in the middle, up in the Horn of Africa, where they really know nothing about wildlife. And helping develop the first national parks is pretty exciting, but with that, we need a lot of help. And people can help by, we need funds to do the work that we do. Conservation is something that everyone thinks it is done from the goodness of our hearts, obviously, but trying to keep our staffing and our programs going does take support. And we welcome people to support us in different ways. One could be by going on our website, obviously, cheetah.org, and you can sponsor a cheetah. That's one way. You can sponsor a livestock guarding dog, or even sponsor an educational program.
Tell us, how much does it cost to sponsor a cheetah and one of these guardian dogs?
Well, for a year's care for a cheetah is $5,000. That's what they're, just to give them food every day. And for a livestock guardian dog, it's about $500. And that's to get it up and out to its farmer. So
that's
both
such
of those
a good idea to use nature to balance nature.
The dogs are wonderful.
Yeah, I can just imagine. They look so robust. If I was a cheetah, I would go in the other direction.
They do. Well, and no, even the leopards do, but they don't want to fight. So they're a big, big dog, and they're great. The other thing too is to remember that people can volunteer. So if people want to do things that are different, you can volunteer and help us with everything that we do here in Namibia or up in Somaliland. So
good. Laurie, thank you so much. I deeply appreciate your passion and everything that you're doing. I mean, to dedicate one's life, everyone, for 45 years to preserve and protect one single species is an extraordinary act of courage and I would say heroism on behalf of all of us for such a precious, beautiful species. We've all seen the cheetah run. We've all been inspired, and as I was when I was a little boy, and Laurie was as a young woman, and so it's very understandable how the cheetah captured your heart, Laurie, as it captured mine when I was a little boy. So I just want to thank you and encourage all of us to go on her website, cheetah.org, and contribute as you can in this noble endeavor. So that'll do it for us for today, everyone. You're all welcome to the after session chat. You'll see the link in the chat box that Stan just put up. And we'll see you then tomorrow for another session on how we can align ourselves with the larger ecology and ecosystem with Catherine Alexander. Laurie, thank you so much. Love what you're doing. And I would love to come to Namibia someday to visit you. It looked fascinating what you're doing.
thank you. Well, we welcome you all. So thanks a lot.